This is my 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I've been using it since it came out over a year ago. So what's it been like to live with? To paint a picture of what I was doing around 13 to 14 months ago, I was writing scripts for Austin Evans, also editing probably 2 to 3 videos every quarter, but I was also planning to spin up this channel at the start of 2022. And with that in mind, I needed a pretty hefty upgrade, especially since the 13-inch M1 that I had was a base model with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. It was fine for the relatively light workload, but if I was looking to do any sort of multitasking or work directly off the internal drive, things started to become a struggle. So when Apple announced the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros, I was ecstatic, and for multiple reasons. Especially for the 14-inch model, coming from the 13, the size difference was not that much. We had extra performance by way of the M1 Pro and M1 Max, and Apple fitted it with bigger batteries to help keep those newer chips running for longer. We also gotta talk about the fact that Apple actually listened to its customers and added ports. Novel concept. Especially for me, an SD card slot does a lot because that's one less dongle I have to carry around with me. But one of the most noteworthy upgrades on the list was the screen. We're talking 120 Hz, mini LED, nits for days. There's also a notch, but at least it was gonna look absolutely gorgeous.
No.
And so, after buying it, what's it been like to live with? For almost a year, I've been working on this YouTube channel, Denki, and the 14-inch MacBook has been with me every step of the way. I've done a lot of graphic design work in After Effects and Photoshop. I've edited over 30 videos for the channel. And of course, I've had a little bit of leisure time with this computer as well. Not for that, I would be extremely burnt out. And through all of it, not only have I been really impressed with the hardware, but I'm also happy with the spec that I got. This laptop is equipped with an M1 Max with a 10-core CPU, 24-core GPU, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 2 terabyte SSD. It's a mouthful. It offers more than enough power for what I need now, and also for as long as I can see in the future. And a huge part of that is also Apple's software optimization, especially in Final Cut, which is kind of the best case scenario. But take, for example, the Akihabara video that I made a few months ago. There was a lot of high bitrate 4K video, a ton of effects, color grading, a lot of plugins that I had to use, and I don't even think I heard the fan spin up once. I don't want to get in the weeds with numbers and benchmarks, but this is seriously more than enough power in the day-to-day where the tool is no longer the bottleneck for me making good videos. I am. Over the past year, I've been fortunate enough to travel a fair bit for work. Whether it's going to New York for a Pixel event or Samsung or OnePlus, or going to Japan to make a video on Akihabara like I mentioned earlier. Wherever work ended up taking me, this laptop has comfortably been my office away from home. A lot of that certainly has to do with performance and portability, but I think the most important thing really is the battery life, especially on the go. And that's despite it paling in comparison to its 16-inch counterpart in this area. Even on the 14-inch Pro, this thing will last me a full day of productivity if I'm just writing up documents and web browsing. But if I'm editing in Final Cut, it'll last me something like 6 or 7 hours, which might not seem like a lot, but try doing that on your gaming laptop. While this might not be enough time for a full editing session, at least for me here on Denki, there are still ways around it, especially if I'm away from a plug. Thankfully, these laptops are equipped with fast-charging USB-C ports and MagSafe 3 that I can plug into, say, a battery bank, like my Anker PowerCore Elite 3 that'll do 87 watts. Though that's if I'm on the go. If I find myself by a wall and need to top off, this thing will charge to 50% in 30 minutes, which is really impressive. Austin.
Yes. Oh, in the video now?
You're in the video. Come in, come in, come in. We have a guest appearance by Denki owner Austin Evans. Oh my God, why? There's lighting here. You could just stand in the, God.
I would like to take this opportunity to ask
Also, side note, I actually don't charge over MagSafe 3 even though the computer did come with the cable. And that's simply because when I'm on the go, I like taking around as few cables as possible, and one USB-C cable can work for a bunch of different devices in my arsenal. So while I'm taking MagSafe for granted, it's good Apple gives you the option to charge quickly via both. I need to English better. Running it back, I want to talk about the screen because it is one of the most important points about this computer, especially considering that it comes from Apple. And again, the displays that they source are usually very good, especially for content creation. Doing a lot of graphic design work and video stuff for YouTube requires a reliable screen to make sure the thing that you're making is interpreted well on other displays, like on a phone, a TV, or a computer monitor. And I've really gotten that reliability off of this display. Talking about some specs, this thing gets eye-searingly bright with HDR content. We're talking 1000 nits sustained, 1600 in peak, and for SDR content, it does 500. All of this to say, it is plenty bright, especially in sunlight, which you kind of need for something portable when you're, say, seated next to a window on maybe an airplane or at a cafe. The work never stops, and the screen shouldn't be holding you back. If I have some complaints, one is that it is glossy, which means while the colors look amazing on it, it is very reflective, especially in a studio here where we have plenty of lights. I see all of them, no matter what is on the screen. But the second, and probably most obvious unless you've been living under a rock, is the fact that this thing has a notch. Yep, they brought it onto their computers as well. Now, it's not all bad. The menu bar does sit around the notch, so you're not really losing all that much. But one way I've been able to mitigate this is with an app called Top Notch. All it does is add a black bar on top of any wallpaper that you put on in macOS, and it hides the notch. In fact, it does a little more than that. It also rounds the corners a little bit, so it kind of Appleifies it even more. I really should stop making my own words. Regardless, it's one way to make things look great. Even without that app, I probably would have just gotten used to the notch anyway, but it's to say that it's there, it exists, it's not good looking, but not a deal breaker. When we're talking about long-term ownership of a laptop, we can't ignore durability. And no surprises here, Apple made a seriously sturdy laptop. It's built with a fully aluminum chassis, one of the best keyboards they've ever made, and it's sustained a lot in the year that I've used it. I mean, this thing has a lot of dings. I think if I close it, man, even the screen is kind of misaligned with the core body when it's closed. You can feel the edge on that. It's definitely a degree or a point of a degree off. What? Unless you really took a fine eye to it and felt around, you wouldn't really notice, and it doesn't hinder with any of the functionality. Doesn't flex or anything. Man, this is seriously a workhorse. It can take a beating without any kind of worry. It's pretty much as good as the day I bought it, just not cosmetically. So yeah, most of it has been pretty good, but what are some of the drawbacks? On the software side of things, macOS is consistent for the most part, but a lot of the hiccups I've experienced have come from updating macOS and especially Final Cut. It's not an issue specific to this laptop. Any new hardware will require some time for the software to catch up, especially on the Apple side. But it does make me wonder in the long term how reliable updates can be. The last thing I want to do is update my computer because of some security update and have it break everything else and slow my workflow down. Another thing coming over especially from the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro is I do miss the 2-day battery life that I used to get on that computer. The M1 chip on that computer was seriously efficient, but while I wouldn't necessarily give up the performance from this computer to have that battery life, it is something that I think about especially on the 14-inch model, which again is in a smaller chassis, which means a smaller battery compared to the 16-inch model. Do I wish I'd gotten the bigger computer? Not really, because it wouldn't fit in some of my backpacks, and it's a little more cumbersome, but it is something to consider if you plan on going this route just like I did. Other than those, I don't have many complaints about this computer. It's almost harder to think about why I don't like it than why I do, which says a lot for how well this thing is packaged, especially for those of us that need the versatility to work basically anywhere. It has the power, battery life, reliability that I need to keep my work going, and I honestly wouldn't trade that for anything. And because of that, I think that this laptop is going to be with me for the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. Unless YouTube and every camera maker on the planet decides 16K is the new meta. Please no. But let me know, what do you guys think of the 14-inch MacBook Pro in the comments below? Also, we're about to hit 100,000 subscribers, so if you haven't yet, I'd love to see you hit that button for more content. And otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one.